Hello, everybody, and welcome to our weekly live stream. My name is Jax James. I'm NORML State Policy Manager, and today I'm also going to be joined by Morgan Fox, our Policy Director based out of DC, and we're going to talk about what to expect for the new year. Now that 2022 is behind us and those sessions are dead, we have some new preparations and expectations for 2023, and we also have some goals. So I want to go ahead and bring Morgan on with me. Everybody say hi to Morgan.
Hey everybody. Hey Jax, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. I'm finally back in Austin post Southwest debacle. Hope everyone else made it through the holidays okay. But, 2023 is kind of off to a big start. I came back to the office yesterday with a lot of email alerts, about statewide legislation that is already being filed. So as I sort through all of that, I wanted to go ahead and chat with everybody and with Morgan about what are NORML's goals. So NORML is one of the only patient and consumer focused advocacy organizations. And so it's really important that people understand our goals. And our goals are informed a lot by our membership. We put out that survey recently, Morgan, and we got thousands upon thousands of people who offered their feedback as to what is important to them when it comes to cannabis legislation. So, of course, number one on the list, what would you guess is number one, Morgan?
Descheduling, I would assume.
Descheduling. See, you got the federal mindset. My state mindset is adult use legalization, but those are kind of hand in hand. So 21 states and DC have already enacted adult use legislation. So, of course, the goal is to get all of the states and territories involved in that as well. We also focus on the creation of medical cannabis programs or significant improvements. So states like Alabama, Idaho, and Nebraska are the only states that have not legalized any type of medical marijuana. There are an additional dozen states that do have low THC medical programs. So of course, those would need improvements as well. Now, kind of linked in to what you were talking about with descheduling, decriminalization and other forms of penalty reduction is super important. So in addition to the states that have legalized, those 21 plus DC, another 10 states have either fully or partially decriminalized certain marijuana possession offenses. It's also important to note that there are over 121 cities and counties that have passed local ordinances that provide for lower penalties than under state law. So they've done some local decriminalization. Additionally, as we see these laws changing across the country, expungement becomes a really important topic of conversation. 24 states have enacted legislation that explicitly permits or facilitates this process of having your marijuana conviction, expunged, vacated, or otherwise set aside, sealed from public view even. So the idea there is if it's legal now, why should you still be paying the penalty from that charge years ago or before it was legal? Additionally, something that I've seen a lot of new legislation filed in as I've been looking at my emails today, patient and employment workplace protections. So 23 states grant employment protections to either medical cannabis users or for medical cannabis users, and then an additional 7 of those states also do so for recreational users. And of course, when we talk about both medical and regulated adult use, home cultivation is a really popular topic of conversation. 22 states allow for home cultivation in their medical programs, and 16 states allow for it in their adult use programs, and 2 more will start with home cultivation this summer, bringing it up to a grand total of 18. This is extremely important because it's an alternative to purchasing from licensed retail producers, and, gardening is therapeutic, right? So that is an important policy we're focusing on. And then the last one I wanted to touch on is equity. So out of the 21 states that have adult use cannabis, 13 have developed social equity programs to help marginalized people become cannabis leaders in their markets. So those are the main takeaways that I want to leave everyone with on the things that we kind of focus on, the goals. Of course, we can also, monitor other bills that we might find to be important, like interstate commerce, which is something that we saw happen in California, and we're seeing other bills, at least one starting to be filed about that as well. So Morgan, as it relates to federal policy, what are you seeing on the horizon for 2023? We just finished the lame duck. We're coming back. We're trying to get a Speaker of the House. Tell me, Morgan, look into your crystal ball.
Well, I'm really happy to see that there's so much action taking place at the local and state level. They say all politics is local, and local reforms lead to state level reforms, which eventually add to additional pressure for federal reforms. But states have traditionally led the way on this issue. And I expect that to continue as we enter the 118th Congress, which is shaping up to be a very complicated and nuanced and potentially difficult political environment in which to promote cannabis policy reform. Right now with the House being narrowly controlled by the GOP, a party that has traditionally been less supportive of cannabis policy reform, does create some issues for us. While we are seeing a lot more engagement from Republicans on this issue, and folks like David Joyce and Nancy Mace really taking the lead on it in the next Congress, we are still going to have to deal with various committee heads that are still pretty staunch prohibitionists. And in order to get bills to move or even get hearings on our bills, could become very difficult. But as you said, we still don't have a Speaker of the House yet, so it's impossible for us to determine who to put pressure on until that happens at the committee level. But that is going to be one of my main goals on Capitol Hill going forward over the next 2 years, is to really work on educating Republican leaders on this issue and trying to get as much support as possible, get as much bipartisan cooperation and conversation going as possible, so that we can help, at the very least, incremental legislation moving forward. The situation is complicated by the fact that we've got a cameral split where the Senate is controlled by Democrats and the House is controlled by Republicans, both by very narrow margins. And so getting both chambers to be able to agree on legislation could prove to be very complicated as well. Not to mention the fact that with the very narrow margin of Democratic control in the Senate, it could be very difficult to get the 10 Republican votes that would be needed in order to pass legislation and beat the filibuster in the Senate. So there are a lot of factors at play that are making 2023 and 2024 shape up to be a potentially very difficult year for cannabis policy reform. But I do want to say that I have a lot of positivity going into this process, because there are a lot of new members of Congress. I believe there's more than 70 new House members that we have the opportunity to educate about this issue and to bring into the fold, and hopefully get them involved in the Cannabis Caucus, to grow that caucus's ranks, and continue pushing on members of the House to make this a high priority issue. We've got a lot of support, but the chances of it coming up and for lawmakers to use political capital to push through hearings and put pressure on leadership for votes is only going to happen if lawmakers' constituents contact them and tell them that it's a high priority. So be on the lookout at NORML.org/act later this week for ways that you can contact your lawmakers and urge them to make cannabis policy reform a priority. Given all that, I know it sounds kind of doom and gloom, but while I think that the chances of being able to maintain momentum for criminal justice reforms as it relates to cannabis, as well as representation in the cannabis industry and things like that, are probably going to suffer at least a little bit over the next 2 years. I do think that there is a possibility for making progress beyond education. So starting off, things like additional research. I know we just passed the first standalone cannabis research bill last year, but there are definitely going to be pieces of legislation introduced in the very near future to help beef that up and provide additional outlets for increased research. I think that we can definitely expect the banking conversation to continue as we've been able to build a lot more support for it on both sides of the aisle over the last year. Um, Expungement assistance is something that has surprisingly become much more palatable to conservatives and is something that, with bipartisan support, I think could see some progress this year. Veterans access, we're already seeing the introduction of bills regarding veterans access, so as well as veteran protections, as well as protections for federal employees and people seeking security clearances so that they're not discriminated against for cannabis use, either past or present. Um, it's going to take a little while to figure out exactly what the situation is and what's going to be possible, and I'm sure that that will be fluid as the months go on. But rest assured that we are going to take every opportunity to bring this issue to the forefront and to try to push for any sort of positive legislation that we can to be passed through both chambers and sent to the president for signature before the 2024 elections. And I guess just one thing to leave everybody with, this is and again an issue that enjoys pretty broad bipartisan support, but getting lawmakers to actually use their political capital to support it and to put it at the top of their to-do list is going to take everybody's help to really put on the pressure. And now is the time to do it. As the new Congress is getting up and running, so that lawmakers have this fresh in their mind and it's not something that necessarily gets brought up much later in the session or that becomes an afterthought when they're already busy with lots of other things. We need to hit them hard and hit them early and buttress that with education about the issue, which I think we have a great opportunity to do on both sides of the aisle over the next couple of weeks.
Agreed, absolutely. And I mean, some of the takeaways that you said stand true at the state level too, right? Many of the sessions will be starting within the next days and weeks. And so as these bills are pre-filed and we put the action alerts out, it's important from the get-go that your either federal or local or state legislators know your position. So, Morgan, you mentioned normal.org/act, and there are 2 federal action alerts you can participate in now. Morgan will continue to add them as they are needed and created. And then you'll see those bills that have been pre-filed that we have action alerts so far for by the states. I personally really like the dynamic map. You can take your mouse and hover over your state and see if anything is filed there that you can take action on. I did want to go to the comments that someone was asking about some actions from Virginia. I am working with Virginia NORML. We should have the action alerts up for them shortly, so definitely stay tuned for that. But as of right now on the Take Action page, basically the only pre-filed bills that we have action alerts up for yet are out of Texas, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Missouri. So real quick then, I would like to kind of pivot to my expectations or my forecast concerning certain states. And so Morgan, feel free to chime in. But some people have, commented where they're from. And so keep dropping it in there in case I'm talking about the state that you live in. But first off, let's talk about, I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Let's talk about Hawaii. So incoming Governor Josh Green is supportive of legalization for adults, and this raises the expectations that lawmakers can move forward with the issue this year because the previous governor was not supportive of legalization. In Kansas, legislators have held multiple hearings in recent months regarding the creation of a medical cannabis program in the Bluegrass State. These hearings will form the blueprint of the soon-to-be introduced medical cannabis legislation. In Kentucky, Governor Beshear, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, sorry, signed an executive order in November providing legal protections for qualifying patients who obtain medical cannabis products from out of state. The order takes effect on January 1st, so just a few days ago, and provides eligible patients with full, complete, and conditional pardon if they face prosecution for up to 8 ounces of cannabis. Additionally, a new report from the state's Medical Marijuana Advisory Committee determined that marijuana can serve as an alternative to opioids, which we all understand. It also said that Kentuckians are leaving the state to seek medical cannabis treatment, and that marijuana helps military veterans find relief from symptoms of PTSD. So both of these actions together are expected to strengthen lawmakers' efforts to pass a comprehensive medical cannabis bill in 2023. Then let's talk about Minnesota. Past efforts by the Minnesota House to advance legalization was stalled in the Republican-controlled Senate. The Senate is now under Democratic control, and the governor, Tim Walz, has also voiced his opinion for legalization legislation to be delivered to his desk. Now, New Hampshire, the House in New Hampshire passed legalization legislation on multiple occasions, and bipartisan legislation has already been announced for the upcoming session. Although Sununu has opposed legalization in the past, his most recent comments on the issue show a bit of a softening of his position. He said during a debate last month that reform could be inevitable, but he also added that states need to be patient about how you do it. Sorry, New Hampshire, you're surrounded. Go ahead and go for it. North Carolina, Governor Cooper recently said that he thinks medical marijuana legalization bill has an opportunity to pass in the upcoming session, and he reiterated his support for also the broader decriminalization of cannabis possession, specifically noting racial disparities in enforcement. So a big deal here, Oklahoma. All right, everybody listen up. Y'all remember all the drama surrounding Oklahoma. Oklahoma voters will decide on a citizen initiative measure to legalize marijuana in a special election held on Tuesday, March 7. Only state question 820 will appear on the ballot, and this is a first. So literally a special election just about legalizing in Oklahoma. And lastly, I want to talk about Pennsylvania. Advocates are hopeful that the newly Democratic House will partner with the governor-elect to push for legalization in 2023. So we have some really awesome stuff on the horizon. And of course, many things can change between now and the filing deadlines. So expect to see lots more actions, lots more bills coming up. As I mentioned, I have about 25 bills or so that I'm auditing just today to see which ones we will create action alerts on. So in the next little bit, you can expect that. Morgan, anything that you want to add to some of these expectations?
Well, I mean, I think in addition to some of the more major bills that we're seeing, we can probably expect to see hundreds, if not thousands, of cannabis policy related legislation at the state level and as well as the local level over the next year. So it's going to be a very, very busy time for local activists. So everybody gear up and get ready. I'm also very, very excited about Oklahoma from a data nerd perspective. There has been really a lack of solid analysis of the ways in which the presence of cannabis policy reform initiatives impact turnout or the performance of other initiatives on various state ballots. And this is going to be a real interesting test case to really isolate a legalization initiative and put it before the voters on, an off year and in an off month, really. So it'll be really interesting to see what we get in terms of turnout and how the vote ends up going. Just from a research perspective, I think that information is going to be incredibly useful for political strategists that are trying to push ballot initiatives in other states in the future.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if being bolstered by the general election has more of an impact. I mean, I remember the medical one was people were saying, oh, all these other factors came into play. So now stand alone on a really weird date. Let's see what Oklahoma thinks about it. I'm going to come over to comments real quick just to see if we have any questions over here. We have people watching from Missouri, California, Virginia, Alabama, New York, Texas. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. I don't see any questions, though. So what I would like to leave everybody with is I would like you to please bookmark and visit weekly normal.org/act. And that way you can participate in all of our federal and state action alerts and make sure that you are up to date on what is going on. Those who are in Ohio, you probably just saw that the governor signed legislation to help with marijuana convictions and paraphernalia possession. And we have a blog post up on that you can read about. So normal.org, your one-stop shop for everything amazing. Did you have any closing thoughts for everybody, Morgan?
Uh, Not really. Just I know that things might be frustrating early on, but this is a really long fight, and we're making progress every single year. So don't get discouraged if things don't work out your way in the next couple of months or even the next couple of years. We just got to keep fighting.
Yes. And I mean, it is kind of to the point where, especially with legalization, we're getting to some of the more hard fought arenas, hard fought states where it's going to be more difficult, more strategic. So it's really important that we all stay teamed up together on this, on the same page, and get the work done. So, on that note, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. First live stream of 2023 on the books. Very happy to have you with me, Morgan.
Free in
And
23.
yeah, I love that. Awesome. And also the plan is, everybody, for 2023 is that I will be doing these live streams around lunch time on Tuesdays. And in general, if Morgan can, he's going to try to join me for the last Tuesday of the month to give a federal update. So just to kind of set that expectation with everybody. On that note, happy Tuesday to all. And I will see you later, Morgan and friends. Take care, everyone.